Welcome back to another episode of Hard Money Dispatch, the show that demystifies sound money and helps you see the system for what it is. Today's guest is Besa Masaiti. She is the founder of Rehoboth Research, a Pennsylvania-based research firm focused on quantitative intelligence for complex infrastructure. She is a Woman FIDE Master and professional chess player with a master's in financial engineering from Lehigh University. Her work bridges the gap between high compute industries like AI and Bitcoin and renewable energy feasibility. Besa, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Why don't you start off by just giving us a brief background on yourself? You're a professional chess player and a financial engineer. Those are two pretty interesting backgrounds and don't typically go together. Why don't you just walk us through how that came to be, where it led you today?
Yeah, so I can start with the chess stuff. So I am from Botswana and I have been playing professional chess since I was 11, so since 2013. And, I played at the national level, international level, and then I won a chess scholarship back home. I was the first chess player to win the sports scholarship to study college stuff and study chess abroad. So I studied econ at Texas Tech University and I played for the chess team. And then I graduated college early and then I did my master's science in financial engineering. And the financial engineering part came about because my mom was a forex broker for a couple of years when I was growing up, and so obviously she had to talk about technical indicators, mentals, science, that kind of thing. So I was introduced to that world when I was about 10 years old, 9 years old, something like that. So it was always part of a pipeline. Like we once discussed that I'm probably going to study that when I grow up. So that's where financial engineering came from, obviously building on my economics foundation at Texas Tech. Yeah.
Interesting. Would you say the two played into each other at all? Like, did playing chess help you in financial markets? I mean, trading, investing, especially when it comes to technical analysis type things and, timing entries and exits. I can kind of see on the surface those things seem like they don't really go together, but is there a similar kind of thought process, or did one kind of help you with the other, would you say?
I think from a psychological standpoint, because when I was studying financial engineering, my focus was not like traditional finance and futures and options. That was part of the academic curriculum. But we had like capstone projects where you work on real world projects. And my niche was like blockchain technology. So the chess psychology part came about when venturing into a new industry that I knew cryptocurrencies because everyone in 2020, 2021 knew like if you're new to the industry at that point, you knew like, oh, people can trade this 24/7. It's not like the stock market. So I knew that, but like going into blockchain tech from an academic standpoint and doing analytics and research was all new to me. And just like when you play chess professionally, there are certain characteristics that you develop, like perseverance, willingness to take on a new challenge, a willingness to make changes to your assumption as you receive new data and as the position changes. So it's more like psychological characteristic driven than like because I was a chess player, I can identify this trading strategy in the with the snap of a finger, I think.
There's a similar mindset though. That was well put. That's kind of, I guess, kind of what I was thinking, but you put it into words better than I did. So let's move on to Rehoboth Research. The company describes its work as quantitative intelligence for complex infrastructure, as I said in the introduction. So for someone who's hearing that for the first time, what does that actually look like in practice? What does it entail?
hmm I mean, it sounds like a couple of buzzwords, right? But the quant part comes because I studied financial engineering, so I guess you can call me a quant, not in the traditional sense because I don't do like what people do at Citadel, but I'm more into blockchain tech. But it's really um when you are looking at a complex sector or product like Bitcoin mining, right? Not everyone understands what that is all about or about AI data centers, how they work and how they play out into trickle down into our daily lives as both entrepreneurs and single persons. So my my company, when it comes to Bitcoin mining, AI data centers, renewable energy, is really looking for ways to um, give insights actionable insights on decisions that you can make, right? If you want to set up a Bitcoin mining operation in Southern Africa, there are different metrics that you have to look into. Policy, regulation, then energy constraints, grids. That's where we come in. We make it easier and clearer for you to use that actionable information to decide whether or not you should settle there or not. Like, yeah.
That's really interesting. So would you say you kind of advise companies before when they're planning to set up an operation? Or do you have could you walk us through an example? Because I'm curious of what that looks like and what role you guys play for, say, a company that's wanting to set up a data center somewhere, and you help them determine all these variables of whether it's a good idea or not, more or less.
Mm. Yeah, there's that consulting part, as you said, where it's like more advisory, and then there's the technical part where we have it's like a machine learning tool that is a solar feasibility engine. Um, like as you probably know, like when it comes to Bitcoin mining, the biggest operational expense there is electricity, right? And so when some in parts of America, you will see sometimes legislators, when they don't understand that Bitcoin mining can stabilize the load, right? They have that kind of instinct to say the Bitcoin miners, AI data, they have to pay their fair share. And then there's that fear mongering when they don't really understand. So this forces operators to sometimes consider other places. So if you want to move to Botswana and a place like Botswana where there's abundance in solar energy, right? We are moving from like dependence on fossil fuels to more renewable sources of energy, right? There's an abundance of solar energy as like, in Africa, we have a lot of natural resources, but one of the biggest problems is infrastructure. So when you want to deploy there, you're going to find that there is solar energy, policy is good, political landscape is good, but you want to now build a solar farm there, right? So you need to be able to get away with manual systems where you have to hire these consultants that go in there and then spend weeks or months or days trying to decide if your team should build a farm there or not. So our feasibility engine uses machine learning, like it's a software layer that helps you to determine using geospatial data and other metrics whether it's a good idea and whether you're going to get your yields worth if you build your solar plant there or not.
Wow, I've never even heard of such a thing. So you mentioned geospatial data. What are some of the inputs for this machine learning model that you use to determine feasibility of a project?
Yeah, some of them are the usual, like, global horizontal irradiance, DNI, temperature, that kind of, those are things that metrics that you take into consideration when using satellites as sources of data. So anything to do with the of the condition of the atmosphere, like the climate, the weather, historical data, that kind of a thing. That's the geospatial data. Yeah.
A big part of your work involves de-risking solar powered compute in emerging markets. What does de-risking mean in that context, and why are emerging markets where that opportunity is most concentrated?
Mm. De-risking just means when we are talking about capital, should you move your capital into that structure or not? Right? If you are an investor, institutional, retail, you're a bank, a credit financier that maybe people want to build data centers there and they need financing that's not just bootstrapped and you want to decide. That's the work that I do at Rehoboth Research helps you make that decision. Is this thing worth investing capital or not? For example, I'm currently in discussion with the Bank of Botswana, which is the central bank of Botswana, for a sandbox, like a sandbox testing pilot thingy, where they're going, like, as we are building more solar projects and having more, like, I think our president signed an MOU with a Oman company or the country of Oman to say they're going to build a 500 megawatt solar project with as well as storage, right? You need storage is one of the biggest costs there. So I forgot my train of thought, but yeah. So with the Bank of Botswana Sandbox, we're trying to test out whether that works or not, right? If people want to build more solar projects, they need financing from banks, from credit unions, whatever. But credit unions need to know, like, should I invest in these people or not? They said they want to build in this location, but is this location gonna give me gonna give them the yield that they need to come and pay me back what I've invested in? So like that's I think is a good example.
Right. Okay. So along that line, when you're evaluating these things, trying to figure out whether a Bitcoin mining operation powered by renewables is viable in a given region, are there any variables that most people overlook or get wrong? Because there's the typical things you think of, like, is there enough solar energy? What's the grid like? The climate things you mentioned. Is there anything that people don't expect or isn't often talked about?
I think yeah, we can talk about uptime. We can talk about not just the static cost of energy, but logistics. We can talk about grid stability. We also need to talk about like policy, right? When it comes to electricity, since we're having all these high compute operations, Bitcoin mining and AI data centers and whatever else, countries, states, as you know, in tech in the US, their legislation is continually changing as they monitor how those operations are affecting residential and small businesses and stuff like that. So you really have to pay attention. I think policy people, they're underlooked in a lot of ways, but they are very important. Like even in Botswana, I think Botswana Power Corporation, which is the institution that oversees everything to do with electricity in Botswana, they put up a 46% hike on electricity tariffs. So if you are someone who just relocated to Botswana, I'm using Botswana as an example because that's where most of my work is when it comes to solar feasibility stuff. So if you're
Right.
an operator that just moved to Botswana and you're not keeping up with that kind of with the legislation, that you can find out tomorrow that maybe they shut down your operations or maybe something has changed and your capex or opex has changed. So I think you really have to pay attention to that. And when I was writing I wrote a white paper about Bitcoin mining and the solar opportunity in Botswana. Some of my focuses were on that and on the importance of paying attention to legislation.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I've also written a couple of white papers for Bitcoin mining and data center companies, but this is a whole nother angle, a whole nother level that I'm not used to. Most of my work was just kind of describing how their operation worked and the benefits of it and stuff like that. But wait, I want to backtrack just a second because you were mentioning working with the Central Bank of Botswana. What exactly is it that they're hoping to achieve? What is the goal of the project? You mentioned 500 megawatts. That's pretty large. What are they going to do with that again?
Yeah, okay, so those are two things. The first one, the 500 megawatt is so basically Botswana is a heavily dependent on diamond production, agriculture, tourism, some coal production, that kind of a thing. And so, right, like it's not the 80s or 90s anymore, because like there's this influx of synthetic diamonds in the market, and not everyone believes that a diamond is a girl's best friend. So, like with that change in the market, they've had to adjust, right, diversifying away from their usual things, because they subsidize heavily sectors like healthcare and education. So if you're not meeting your quotas, that affects, right? You're no longer able to buy medicine that you should have been able to buy. Maybe you're no longer able to pay for textbooks that were initially free, and maybe teachers aren't able to get their salaries on time, stuff like that. So they've had to subsidize and move into sectors like energy, solar energy, as an example, right? The world is moving more into renewable energy. And Botswana, I think we have very high metrics when it comes to solar, but not enough infrastructure. So, um, yeah, they are trying to get more partnerships, more MOUs, make it easier for independent power producers to build solar deployments. So that's what they're trying to do, and that's how our president has been signing MOUs, partnerships, and deals with other companies, both abroad and locally. The 500 megawatt one, I think, is the biggest one so far. They signed it, and it started somewhere in the northeastern part of Botswana. And then the sandbox for the Bank of Botswana, they are trying to, I guess they're trying to spotlight any entities in Botswana that are focused on financial innovativity, whether it's blockchain stuff, AI stuff, know your customer stuff, anti-money laundering stuff. And then my proposal that has to do with creating like a quantitative credit risk framework for solar financing, right? As we are moving more into solar energy deployment, because formerly we had little to no, maybe we had like these PV photovoltaic panels on government owned housing for policemen. I used to see them growing up, but we didn't have that much in large scale, like in the not commercial, but I think I forgot the word after commercial. So yeah, there I have presented that, and I'm like we are underway in the process of testing out my product with uh real world credit financiers and banking institutions, Bank of Botswana included. Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. Yeah, just to backtrack a little bit again, for anyone who isn't aware of this, the market for diamonds has changed a lot in the last 10 or 20 years because synthetic diamonds are chemically and visibly almost identical to real world diamonds. And so the price, and they cost 90% less. So the price of real mined diamonds has fallen by about 50% over the last 10 to 20 years, I think it is. And yeah, it's really interesting. I never thought about the impacts that might have on an emerging market economy that relies on that for a good portion of its GDP. I imagine that's got to be somewhat devastating, and it makes sense they would have to pivot into other sources. So you also work on accelerating government contract procurement using AI. We've touched on this somewhat already. That sounds like a very different world from Bitcoin mining and solar energy, although you've already kind of touched on how they uh, do interact. The phrase bankable decisions stands out in your mission statement. That implies you're not just producing research for the sake of research, you're producing something a lender or investor can act on. How does that standard change the way you approach the work?
Yeah, um it means I have to have like a holistic approach, right? Like I said, it's not just about the grid, it's not just about the cost of energy, but you also have to take into consideration legislation. So my pipeline for the solar feasibility thing, it has like three layers, right? So there's actual feasibility. Is this location worth investing money into in terms of the yield that we're going to get back, right? Climate change does affect that and it creates increased variability, but that's the first layer. The second layer is taking into consideration financial metrics that banks want to know, like DSCR, will the debt that they will give to you be able to be covered in the agreed amount of time, LCOE modeling, the levelized cost of energy. And then a third layer, it's an agentic layer, which is right as policy changes, as regulation changes, as tariffs are hiked or cut, right? If people protest and we are like, oh, that 46% hike is too much, let's renegotiate. How does that affect my clients? So that it's like a multi-pronged approach to make sure that you can't just look at one facet of things, right? Because they are all interlinked and they all speak into profit margins or whatever of clients. So yeah.
There's a growing conversation about Bitcoin mining as a tool for energy development in countries that have abundant natural resources but underdeveloped grids and infrastructure, as we've been talking about. From your research, how realistic is that? How's it going so far? And is there anywhere you're seeing it play out or anywhere that's on the radar other than Botswana?
Yeah, I can't name the companies from the top of my head, like the Bitcoin miners, but yeah, they are scattered all across Southern Africa and in the east, in Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, where they have strong hydroelectric power systems. I've seen a lot of Bitcoin. I forgot. I don't think Marathon Digital is one of them. I might be wrong. I cannot remember at this point. But yeah, they've been leveraging hydroelectric power systems for a while now, right? Where the infrastructure is there. So them relocating their operations or setting up a new center for Bitcoin mining there is not like where they have to go to a place where there's no infrastructure at all and they have to build out their own thing, right? And then that's different from like Marathon Digital. Marathon Digital, they want like sovereignty when it comes to their energy, right? They sign these nuclear power PPAs. I think it's nuclear. They also sign these solar energy PPAs all across the world, I believe. And yeah, we are seeing more of them migrating to the southern region and eastern region of Africa, where there's hydroelectric power. But my focus has been on solar energy because I am from Botswana, so there's that bias. But also, the research that I've gone into is I've seen how it can be affordable and it can be much preferred for them if they relocate to a region like that.
So it sounds like a lot of this work is in the private sector, although sometimes it is in the public with, the Bank of Botswana, for example. Do you think we'll be seeing more of that going forward in emerging markets and elsewhere? I mean, I know Bhutan, for example, has been mining Bitcoin for quite some time. Do you think that's a trend that'll keep increasing as countries and governments figure this out and have more help from companies like yours to actually, uh, you know, fine tune the details?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's going to be an increasing trend. They are still a little bit skeptical about digital assets. So when you come up to like a traditional finance institution like that, you don't want to lead with, oh, we are doing it for Bitcoin miners. And then it's like, oh, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. Oh, the what are they called? Forgot. The meme coins, right? So that's not really how you want to approach those kinds of people and the legislators back home. But you want to curate it in such a way that you show that you are matching supply to demand, right? Once we build these solar pipelines and we have 500 megawatts of energy waiting, someone is going to have to pay for that energy. And that someone can be a Bitcoin miner whose dependence on the grid is they have like a flexible load. That someone could be an AI data center that will create jobs or whatever. So it has to be like we have supply, we have demand that we can bring to match that supply, right? Yeah.
I see. So it's more about creating the power infrastructure first, and then it naturally kind of leads to, hey, Bitcoin miners can help stabilize this. Because a lot of people don't know that even though Bitcoin mining takes a lot of energy, the vast majority of it for many miners comes from either renewables or stranded energy. In other words, energy that wouldn't be used otherwise, would have just been wasted. That happens a lot with solar. It happens a lot with flared natural gas. So, and the other thing you mentioned flexible load. For anyone who isn't familiar with that term, it basically just means that Bitcoin miners can turn on and off at any time according with demand. So if there's excess energy, they can keep their miners powered on. If there's a problem where there's a lack of energy due to, like a natural disaster or something, then they can turn off their miners and take some pressure off of the grid. I know we saw this in Texas. I think it was in 2021 or 22 when there was a huge, devastating winter storm. Miners were able to turn off and save the grid, which was, according to some experts there, was within minutes of collapse. That's a huge benefit. I know Daniel Batten has done a ton of work on this, on the environmental benefits of Bitcoin mining, the infrastructure benefits of Bitcoin mining. Yeah, it makes sense that you'd have to worry about the infrastructure first, and then naturally, miners would see that as an opportunity because if there's energy, especially renewable energy, that they can get for low cost, they're going to want to come there. And then whoever's supplying that energy, once they understand what it actually entails having a Bitcoin miner there, it would make sense for them to want that because it'll be profitable for them since they'll be able to offload some of their stranded energy, or whenever there's excess supply, the Bitcoin miner can use it. And for the Bitcoin miner, it'll be a cheaper source of energy because that's the biggest variable in how profitable a mining operation is, typically, is the cost of energy. So moving on here, starting to wrap up. If someone listening to this is involved in energy infrastructure, Bitcoin mining, or some combination of both, and they're trying to figure out where the industry is headed over the next few years, what's the one thing you think they should be paying closer attention to?
I mean, just as a side note, obviously we've seen the Bitcoin mining industry, like some of the operators, they've integrated AI data hosting so that their business model is expanding with added information. But I think the biggest thing to pay attention to obviously is artificial intelligence, right? You're having more startups that are involved in managing the grid and managing smart meters and stuff like that. So really understanding how artificial intelligence with its software layer contributes to real world deployments and like these smaller I think it's Kevin O'Leary, that businessman. He likes to mention that the opportunity that AI brings is for AI and conversant people being able to integrate those systems into small business operations, right? Small businesses don't really understand, especially if they're into Bitcoin mining in a small scale, they don't understand there's this disruptive technology, but how does it make sense for my business model? How does it make sense for my clients? So being able to understand how you can tie AI to real world deployments. It's not just because, oh, it's AI, it's a technology that you must adopt it, but you must understand what is its advantage, what are the use cases, what do operational expenses look like when I have to pay for GPU costs or whatever. And yeah, I think that's the most important thing to pay attention to.
You mentioned Kevin O'Leary. I know he's planning a massive data center here in Utah, where I am. And there's been a big uproar about it. A lot of residents don't want it. There's been protests and city hall meetings trying to fight the establishment of it because, well, for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest ones that comes to mind for me is the water usage of a data center that is purely AI. It's different when they integrate, Bitcoin mining and AI, but one that's purely AI it's not a flexible load at all because it has to be constantly on 24/7, and it uses water for cooling, whereas Bitcoin miners can use a variety of different methods for cooling. Sometimes it's water, but it can also be two-phase immersion cooling liquids and other things. So, and there's a huge drought here in the Salt Lake area, the Great Salt Lake, one of the biggest bodies of water in North America. I think it's the biggest salt based body of water in North America. It's already about 70% dried up. Huge drought. We had very little snowfall this year, and the summertime it's going to get even worse because there'll be hardly any runoff to replenish reservoirs. But anyway, people are heavily against that big data center that Kevin O'Leary is part of the group establishing in Utah. So I guess the question is, do you see that being a problem anywhere? Like, what if you have this great project planned in a place that seems like a good opportunity, and then there's pushback from the local community? What do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, today I saw his post about him having studied one of the few data center operators, whatever, to have studied environmental studies or something, and him saying, like, he pays attention to how this will affect the environment. Obviously, there's light pollution. Building that kind of infrastructure in residential communities or close to them is always going to come back with backlash. But I mean, you have to, like the HVAC people, right? Really working to understand different clean strategies, moving away from water-based to whatever. I mean, I haven't paid attention to what novel startups are. Obviously, someone is probably building something to do with a novel cooling strategy that doesn't depend on water. So that's something to really pay attention to because there is a demand, right? There is a demand for what he's building, but it can come to a cost. Is it sky pollution? Light pollution, to name a few, and that water dependence disrupting environmental ecosystems and whatever. I think, yeah, more research needs to be done because it is like inevitable. I mean, they're going to fight it, but even if he doesn't build there, he's going to build somewhere else. And
Right.
that somewhere else, his team and, industry at large has to research more into how we can be less harmful to the environment, even when we are trying to meet demand. I mean, it's like paradoxical, right? Because the residents, not just of Utah, but of any place, they are the ones that are causing that increase in demand, right? Consumption using AI at both the enterprise level and at the personal level. But building what is required to keep on feeding that demand is a problem they have. It's like it's a problem. It's not a problem, but it is humanity. So I think, yeah, paying attention to novel cooling strategies and ways that we can impact the environment less on a practical level and not just to appease environmentalists. That should, yeah, that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's demand for the data center because people use AI, but then when it comes to their hometown, they don't want the data center there, but sooner or later it's going to get built out somewhere. And like I could not protest the establishment of something here, even though I see how it could be problematic. But I mean, I use AI, so how would that make sense? But yeah, it's quite a conundrum. I would say it'd be interesting to uh, see how it plays out. There's a lot of changes coming and big industry being built. So, Besa, how can people get in touch with you and follow what your organization's doing?
Yeah. So I'm always like I'm a Gen Z, so I'm always on my phone. So you on LinkedIn, on X, my name is Besa Masaiti, Besa, surname Masaiti. Then my email is besa@rehobothresearch.org. So you can I also write articles on Medium whenever I have the time. So you can search me up on Medium if you're interested in crypto, energy, AI stuff, or talks about Satoshi and if he's the CIA or not. I write about that, so you can find me there too.
I like it. Sounds good. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Hard Money Dispatch. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review if you can. The podcast is small but growing. It's a great way to support the show for free. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to the Hard Money Dispatch newsletter. I'll leave a link in the description, along with links to Besa and her work. I hope you found value here. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.